Hi again then guys, and welcome to another car review on Forza Motorsport 7, and in this particular pick we're featuring a familiar face in the world of racing, the Corvette race car, in particular the 7th generation C7.R, and this is a car which won't necessarily get people overly excited as far as the roster of Forza 7 goes, but it's one of those cars which is dependable. It's kind of an old faithful, even if you count the previous generation models like the C5R, the C6R. They've always been very strong race cars in the Forza games. Now personally, I'm a huge fan of the C5 generation Corvette, in particular in its racing form. It's such a good car to work with, highly competitive. The C6R technically is a better machine, but I never really liked it as much in racing form. This one returns to form for me. It's got that sharp edge that the C5R had over most of its competition, and it certainly brings its A game. Now, as far as the specs for this car go on Forza, it does, as with most of the cars that you win, or some of the ones that you buy if you choose to, it does come pre-tuned, at least to a certain degree. If you remove that pre-tuning though, to find out its actual stock specs, if you will, but stock of course is a very relative term when it comes to a race car, you're looking at the R class, not too surprisingly, R814 to be exact, and that engine puts out reasonably good numbers. But of course, in the world of GT racing currently, with current regulations, the numbers aren't necessarily as earth-shattering as you might expect. In fact, in some cases, you're looking at similar power even to the road version. Now, this car comes with 491 horsepower to begin with, and I would say a more impressive 485 pound-feet of torque. Now the power is good, certainly good enough, but it's always been that kind of effortless torque, that shove out of corners, which has given the American cars such a different flavour and a different edge over many of their, for instance, European or Japanese rivals. Most of their cars tend to be higher revving engines with not as much torque. Engines which like to be worked hard and which work at their peak in much higher rev ranges, if you will. Stuff like the Ferrari 458 GT3, Lamborghini Huracans and Gallardos. This one isn't like that. It's much more like a Viper race car, what you'd expect from that low down, lazy torque, which is just there as soon as you need it. In a similar way to some non-American cars in the GT classes, like the Bentley, the Continental GT3 for instance. These cars have such a well of torque that they can provide from, that it is lazy power. It sounds like a bad thing, but it really isn't. You have that power all the time, as soon as you need it. You do not need to work the engine hard at all, but one of the potential downsides, of course, of a very torquey engine, especially when it's in a lighter vehicle, in the case of this car, 1245 kilos stock, is that it can sometimes cause excessive wheel spin and burn through your tyres, and in something like an endurance race in particular, that can be a hindrance. In the case of this car, the fact that it doesn't have a ridiculous amount of torque, just a better amount than most of its rivals, means that it's, I would say, pretty perfectly placed. You can definitely spin up the rear wheels, but at the same time, it's not anywhere near as tail-happy or as tire-shreddingly badass as some people might expect an American race car to be. It doesn't really have that image. It's much more focused, much more efficient in the way it delivers its performance and how competitive it is than you might assume a car like this would be. Assume, that is, if you didn't know better, because of course the Corvette has always been competitive in these higher class GT forms. As I said earlier with the C5 and the C6, this one's no different. It's a highly competitive car, and although it may not necessarily have earth-shattering numbers across the board, even the horsepower per tonne isn't even 400, but it gets the job done. So at the end of the day, who really cares how good or bad the numbers are if it can give you victories? And this car definitely can. Now you have the opportunity to win this in the game, and if and when you get that opportunity, I would definitely recommend picking it up, because even the full price is only 400,000 credits, which is still pretty reasonable. That's basically supercar money for a car which can quite easily outrun most supercars around a track. But if you get the chance to win it, it will serve you very well. This is my go-to GT car, and at the moment of releasing this video, I do own a couple of others, but this is still my go-to vehicle for GT class racing. It's just dependable, it's good looking, it sounds the part. Is it a little bit tail happy? Sure. Sure it is, but so are plenty of other cars in the GT class as well. Mid-engine ones, front-engine ones, whatever, so that isn't really that special. Pretty much any race car can spin up its wheels if you put the power down too early or give it too much throttle. Overall though, it's a deceptively capable car which lives up to the Corvette lineage. The Corvette has a long history of being in multiple forms of motorsport and doing it very well. This car continues that lineage, and although, as I mentioned towards the start of the video, it's not necessarily a vehicle which is going to blow anyone's mind or get you salivating with anticipation, it's just one of those cars which is consistent, it's competitive, and it will definitely give you plenty of race victories. So overall, it's definitely worth checking out on Forza 7, and of course you can stick around for more car reviews like this one, and see the ones which I've already done in the playlist at the end of this video. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.